That's perfect.
Yeah, it's just I'm not certain how to get people linked to it.
Oh, I can do that later. No problem.
Okay. I'm recording. Everybody,
Great.
This is Devon Howard. Did a wonderful program for us, and he's available with his couch and coffee. And I think Jan already has a question.
Great. Well, first of all, that was just so enjoyable and delightful and wonderful playing. I do have a question about your shoes. Tell me about those shoes.
Sure. Well, that's always a good question that organists ask. And I'll just say briefly, I'm in the auditorium and I have several students with me too. So they might ask questions as well. And so some of my answers I'll tailor to them because most of them are not organists at all. But organists in general use special shoes to play, of course. And the reason is that it gives you the ability to slide across the notes a little easier. And it helps with hitting some of the notes. A lot of organ shoes have heels on them. I had two influences for shoes. One was studying in Europe. And I noticed that when I was studying in Europe that most organists there did not have specific organ shoes. They just played in whatever they ended up with. And most of them wore pretty nice shoes, so it worked out. And then I studied with Kimberly Marshall at Arizona State University, which is, she's known for her shoes. She likes to wear really high heels. She likes sequins and sparkles. So I felt like I had to keep up somehow. And that's when I found the Ferrari shoes. And I borrowed a trick that dancers use, which is that they put moleskin on the bottom of a shoe to make it better for dancing. So my shoes are regular Ferrari race shoes, so they're really thin, which leaves for accuracy on the notes, but then they have moleskin on the bottom so that they have that feeling of the suede leather as they move across. So does that kind of answer the question where those came from?
Yeah, I was curious about the heel though. It didn't seem to have a raised heel. Do you find that hard to adjust after training on shoes with heels maybe?
Yeah, actually at this point it's the reverse problem. I'm so used to playing without a heel. Recently I ordered a second pair of shoes that was a different style, and they have the regular organ heel on them. And I basically can't play in them. I'm just so used to not having a heel. But I still wanted those for special types of music that might require double pedal or things like that.
Well, I wanted to comment on the pedagogical aspects of using that instrument in your teaching. I mean, for registration sounds of the period, for articulation, has it been as enjoyable a pedagogical experience as you'd hoped?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Hauptwerk offers a tremendous opportunity for students as far as getting the sounds in their ear, because I can assign a student to work on specific rep and spend time on that instrument so they get those sounds. Now, I will say the shortfall for me is in the manual technique. I'm very much a mechanical action technique person, historic organs. I've learned on tracker instruments. So it is missing that. You know, it has a little bit of the harder action to sort of emulate that a bit. But I have to be really intentional about getting my students onto mechanical action instruments, onto the harpsichord, into Fort Worth and Dallas area for mechanical action organs, and also clavichord. I try and get them to practice on that as well. But for learning the sounds that they need to hear, it's incredible how versatile that is. Plus it's affordable, so I can theoretically fill practice rooms with them over time and afford to do that. So.
Well, another question I had, did you become familiar with this instrument when you were in Europe, or has it been since that time?
My first exposure to it was when I was living in Boulder, and I had a student that was a mechanical engineer, and he was fascinated about the engineering aspect of it. So he actually built one in his basement, and he kept trying to get me to come over and see it. And I didn't want anything to do with it. I thought, oh, I'm just another synthesizer in the basement, you know. But I ended up going over and seeing it, and I was just struck by the quality of the sounds that he was able to get. But from that point, that was after I was in Europe, and I didn't really become really exposed to Houtwerk till I moved here to Texas. And again, that had to do with my teacher in the Netherlands. He is a historic specialist, an improviser in Baroque styles. He is a Buxtehude player. That's his best repertoire. But he was really sold on Houtwerk. He has one in his house, and he helped the University of Sydney Conservatory of Music get 6 of them for their practice rooms. And he was just really sold on what Houtwerk could do for organists, and especially organ students. So my history in Boulder and then my European teacher kind of helped launch me into that. And really here at Southwestern, it became the only option. When I arrived here, we had no organ, essentially. We had a little Moeller artiste in the chapel, and that was about it. And we needed something, and we needed it fast. So this represented a way to get a good teaching instrument and a good quality sounding instrument right away. Other questions? I can ask the students if they have any as well. Good. Any questions from you all? Students, most of you not organists that we're watching. Yes, sir.
So on an organ, why is there 4 different keyboards?
Okay, so,
Yeah, there's one, but like on an organ, there's 4.
so the question is why so many keyboards? And that's actually a good answer for this particular Houtwerk as well. So organs can have anywhere from 1 to 4. The largest organ in the world has 7. So there's no real limit or expectation. It's just a matter of how large the instrument is. So for this particular instrument here, I wanted a 4-manual keyboard so that it would allow us the flexibility to use sample sets of organs that have 4 manuals. I would say that most organists interact with instruments that have 2 or 3 manuals. 4 is a very large organ, and 5 or more is extremely rare. So this Houtwerk I wanted to have 4 so that we had the ability to emulate a 4-manual console, but most of our sample sets, we use just 2 or 3 keyboards. Another question?
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier there was that one kid, that one guy who I think it wasn't Bach, it was somebody that he was 10 years old when his father died, and he was going to be taken over. In the meantime, they hired an intern. That intern, was he basically doomed to not have a job after the other guy came older? Or was he like, what happened to the intern? Because I feel really bad for him. Did he move on to another position?
That is a very student question. I don't know if you could hear it, but this student is concerned about the interim that had the job for Couperin in St. Maximin when his father died. And yeah, after a few years, he lost the job, basically. He was a stopgap to the next organist. But, you know, I'm sure he got another job. It was Paris. There's lots of organs, so. I'm glad you were paying such close attention, Alan. That's excellent.
Devon,
other questions for? Yeah.
Devon, I have a question. Of all those organs that you sampled, that you played for us tonight, and of all the travels you've had in different areas, what would be your favorite? Do you have a favorite era or a favorite type of instrument?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. I will say first, and a lot of the students wouldn't know this either, but most of the organs that we have, I chose because they're organs I've actually played. I tried to keep it to instruments that I actually knew, and that wasn't entirely possible, but I was trying to get an example of an organ from all of the major regions and all of the major eras that most organ repertoire is taken from. And so it's not really an easy question to answer because I like all of them for their own unique ways, but I will say that if I had to choose just one of the organs that I played tonight and could actually have that organ and play it every day, I would probably choose Zwolle, the Franz Kasper Schnitger at Zwolle, because it's a large instrument, it's very versatile, it's in a fabulous acoustic, and I like the Netherlands. So that's my favorite era of building and my favorite era of repertoire as well. Yeah, good question. Any others? No, they're all eating popcorn. I'm curious if any of you have seen or played any of those organs that I used tonight in person. I miss traveling. I need to get over and experience more of them. Any other questions from the room? Bree, what's your question?
At the bottom right of the video, it says about the
Oh yeah.
so I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, so the question was about the tuning and the temperaments. She noticed that at the bottom of the screen, I had the temperaments listed in the tuning. Organs are very old instruments. So the first organ was 2,000 plus years ago, the prototype. And modern organs, like we're used to seeing them, started showing up in the 1400s. So equal temperament and A440 came much, much later. So on these historic organs, they were tuned whatever was standard for the region, and they had a temperament that was standard for that region and time as well. So when it says mean tone, it's a certain style of tuning where certain thirds are tuned more perfectly. And this is the way choirs sing. When choirs perfectly are in tune, they have perfect thirds, which are more in tune than what a piano can do. So some thirds are tuned perfectly, but because it's a keyboard instrument, it means that you'd have to have two keys for everything, and which isn't possible. So other things become really out of tune. But all of that is done with the physics of sound waves. And so the comma is referring to adjustments that they make in the tuning to compensate a little bit so that you have the variety of a few more keys that you can play in without it sounding really hideous. Yeah, so it's a really good question. There's mean tone temperament, and then there's different types of mean tone temperament. Interestingly, before that, I didn't use it, but some organs have Pythagorean tuning where fifths are tuned in a certain way. But that's a whole different thing. It doesn't really work for most music that we would know. Good. Any other questions, thoughts? Students, any others from you? None of the keyboard students in here have any questions? Okay, somebody was going to ask about the tuning. That's been a very nice benefit to the Hauptwerk for the students to actually hear the tunings. And I've appreciated that aspect of it, especially students with perfect pitch. We have lots of lively discussions about what perfect pitch actually means. There's one in the back who likes to argue with me. So.
Well, Devon, a question that's not related to your program tonight. Are your classes hybrid or back in person, or how's Southwestern handling classes?
Yeah, we are in essentially a hybrid model with an altered semester, and most of the classes take place in person. Students have the option not to attend, and they can do Zoom or Teams or whatever. But for most of my classes, they're small and they're specialized, and the students all show up. So that's been very good. I do have one Gen Ed course that's a lot larger, and that's about 50-50 people online or in class. But So far, we haven't had any outbreaks on campus that I'm aware of, and we've managed to keep things under control. We don't have an active Greek life, so that
Yeah, that helps. That helps a lot.
But we will have an altered semester next semester too. So we're starting a week late, and there will be no spring break. They're just going straight through. So I hope all of you knew that. I heard some groans, but
No wild beach weeks.
no beach weeks.
No Padre
We're
Island.
just trying to keep you contained on campus.
Yeah.
So.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions?
I got another question from a student.
Oh,
What are the pedal things on like the center, in the like the middle? Like is it like a volume?
Yeah, so I'll answer his question and kind of talk about Hauptwerk for the benefit of the organist too. He was asking about the swell pedals, what their purpose was. And swell pedals was actually a technology developed by the Spanish early on in the Baroque. They would put some pipes in a box, and then you had a little lever and you could open the box so that the pipes were louder, and then you could close the box and they'd be softer. But that originally, it started there, and then it developed into an entire section of pipes, not just one set, but an entire section of pipes inside a box with levers, because pipes are just whistles. They're either on or they're off. And this was a way to swell the sound if the box was open and reduce the sound if it's closed. And so they're called swell shoes because you use them to swell the sound. On the Hauptwerk organ, I could customize how many I had, and I specifically wanted 3 so I could emulate a crescendo pedal and then swell and choir enclosures on a 3-manual organ. But with Hauptwerk, it's all completely customizable. So it doesn't matter what the swell shoes are labeled. It doesn't matter what the pistons are labeled. The software allows you to make any of them do anything. So I can make the swell shoe a volume control for the overall volume of the organ in my headphones, or I can make the swell shoes actually operate a swell box or be a crescendo or whatever else. The other thing that I found really helpful with the Hauptwerk technology is the toe studs. I got 5 toe studs on each side, primarily because I wanted them to act as ventil switches in French organs. So I can set those on the French symphonic organs to actually be the ventils for the reeds and the other registrations, rather than a general preset or something like that. So that students got used to actually pressing a pedal note or a pedal stud to get the reeds to come on, just like you would do on a French organ. So they can be pistons, they can be toe studs, but they can also be ventils or any other levers that you want. And that's another great thing about the flexibility of the Hauptwerk software system. So, yeah, that was a good question. Well, Beverly, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
well, I was going to say something, and then I have another question. I really enjoyed hearing the early music. It was so nice to hear Strozzi and the Spagnetta. But my question is, how do you facilitate page turns when you're using your iPad? I know that there's software. What is it that you're using?
So I use, this is a really good question, and musicians in the room, this is something we have to grapple with. How much technology do we use or do we not? And iPads are really useful, but organists tend to shy away from them because we don't have the ability to use the foot pedal to actually switch the pages. So a lot of iPads, you can buy a Bluetooth and you hit a foot pedal and the page advances, but of course with the organ, you're already using your feet. So there's been a couple solutions. I have one colleague who actually has a foot switcher and he tapes it to the crescendo pedal. So he just taps it on the crescendo pedal. That seems a bit risky, but it seems to work for him. I'm not willing to do that. And the best thing to do is get an iPad Pro, because iPad Pro has the facial recognition and you can turn the page with a head nod like that. Yeah, so that's super easy. You just do this, and I haven't, when I've tried it, I haven't had any problems with it. If I accidentally turn a page, I just turn it back. That's no problem, because whether you go left or right. And this is all through Fourscore, the app. But the other thing that we actually did for this recording, because my iPad currently doesn't have facial recognition, it's not the iPad Pro. And so I actually had the camera operator in a ensemble setup. So when you do ensemble setup, you can set one iPad to be the controller and the other iPads to be the follower. So she just sat behind and followed the score, and when it came time to turn the page, turned the page, and then my page turned with it. So that worked pretty well too, as long as they stayed synced up. Otherwise, you got to reach up and tap it. So. I'm curious if any of you use iPads or have tried.
I've tried for cello, not for organ.
Okay.
And I wasn't terribly successful.
I've just this week, I've been having to go back and forth between printed scores and the iPad. And I find myself on the iPad trying to turn the page. And then on the printed score, I try and tap the page. And so I have to really pay attention to which device I'm using. That's happened like 3 times this week, actually. So. Any other questions? Alan?
So that piece that you only played with your feet, tons of people tried to improvise on top of that, they prepared for it, or has anybody actually tried to do anything for that piece?
So his question is about the pedal piece, if it's common to try and improvise a hand part above it or not. And I would say most people don't, just because Bach is Bach, and they, you know, I don't know, that seems a bit risky, but you certainly can. And in fact, the score I was playing off of had suggested chords at the end with your hands to make it sound larger at the ending. But I chose instead to do, the ending is weird. It ends as written on the dominant. So it appears to be unfinished. And some people think that's because Bach wanted his students to finish it. So the pedal exercise was all there, then you end on that note and you finish the piece in your own style. So I actually improvised the end on this recital. I hit that low pedal note, and then the next probably 8 measures were all improvised. And what I chose to do instead of using my hands was I copied a little bit of the Buxtehude figuration in the pedal, which was the next piece. And then I returned back to the opening theme, and then I did double pedal to give a bigger, fuller sense, so that I ended with 2 notes at once instead of just 1 note. But that was all improvised. So that's more common, is that you would change the ending some way or add something at the beginning, not necessarily adding hands above it. I didn't even know about that piece actually till about 2 months ago. I have a terminal degree in organ, and I'd never heard of that piece. So, and my specialty is Baroque music too. So that was a surprise for me.
I was thinking it was in one of the technique books. I can't remember if it was Gleason or Four Paters, but I've used it with students.
Oh, okay. I didn't use either of those methods myself, so I wouldn't have come across it there.
Well, this has been a wonderful, I think, wrap up to his really stunning program. I know I learned a lot and enjoyed hearing a lot. Does anyone have anything you want to say for the good of our group? Any news from your lives or churches? Or it's a quiet group tonight. Well, Devon, unless you or your students have more, I guess that's it for this evening.
I think we're good. They're having their hot chocolate and popcorn, and they seem to have run out of questions. So.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I got one more.
Okay,
one
good.
more. Sorry. The question is, how many different Hauptwerk sample sets are there? We currently, on this organ, have 11. But I don't know how many there are in total. There's well over 200 though. So yeah, I mean, lots of people are there's certain companies that do really high quality professional sample sets, but a lot of people are recording organs all the time for Haltberg's software. When I was in Boulder, I had an interesting Brunsum Cassavant where I was organist, and somebody just showed up one day and said they wanted to record it for Haltberg. He lived in Denver and liked to do it. So there's probably, I would say, getting close to 300 now. Theater organs and other Baroque organs, modern organs, American organs. Yeah.
And when you order your instrument, you get to choose which samples
Well,
you want?
yeah, I ordered this as a custom console from a builder in the Netherlands, and all they do is build consoles for Haltberg. So I ordered it in June, and they delivered it overseas, crated, ready to play in August. So really good turnaround. And they also, part of the cost of the instrument was one of their representatives flew over and helped me to install it in the space and helped me to voice it. So with that particular company, you can order preloaded with whatever organs that you want. And so I did that at the time, but it's unlimited as far as how many I can add to it. It just depends on the size of the computer that's running the system. And of course that can be upgraded as well, because all of the technology is online software. And so I can transfer it to any other computer and upgrade infinitely.
Wow.
And it just all works through MIDI. So it's not proprietary and it's not complicated. Well, I mean, the software is a little bit complicated, but the other great thing about the company in the Netherlands is anytime I need help, I just send them a message through WhatsApp and they hop online and they take over the computer and they fix whatever's the problem. So that's been very convenient too. They helped me just this last week fix something actually. And they just take over the computer and fix it, and then it's done. So,
Technology is pretty great.
yeah, it's very, very convenient.
Well, thank you for bringing your students along, because they had some very insightful questions. And
Yeah, most of them came by choice.
well, how could they resist popcorn and hot chocolate? Well, I guess that's it for this evening, and it's good to see you all. Peggy Groff sends greetings. She had to be out of town, and she and her husband are in a remote location camping, so she wasn't going to be able to access the Zoom meeting. And otherwise, she would have been here. And again, thank you, Dr. Howard, and we will see each other at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay,
Have a good
good
evening.
night.